Welcome everyone to How Good's Innovation Online series. I'm Ethan Solovyev. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at How Good. Our topics focus on biodiversity, regenerative agriculture, and planetary health. In fact, later this afternoon, we have the first session of the sort of deeper innovation working group sessions that are part of this series, focused on planetary health, that intersection between nutrition and sustainability for business leaders, executives and business leaders, decision makers in companies that care about that intersection between nutrition and planetary health. We will also touch on that today, though our main topic is biodiversity. And specifically, we're looking at crop commercialization in the context of biodiversity with Chef Pierre Thiam, the co-founder of Yolélé, and Teranga, and I believe we also have some other folks from Yolélé on today. Thank you for joining as well. Basic overview, we're going to have a quick introductions, which we're doing now. Pierre and I will have a 30-35 minute conversation. We'll do these interactive community breakouts so we get to connect with others and ask some questions, and then we'll round it out with a Q&A with Pierre. And then just a quick note about upcoming events beyond this one. We're going to be looking at agroforestry and industrial crops, focusing on scaling up biodiversity from a different angle and a different ecosystem with Tyler Cage. We'll be looking at fiber and how regenerative agriculture connects with fiber. And then speaking to some colleagues at General Mills who are working on kind of large-scale row crop regeneration and get their thinking. That's all coming up soon. But for now, welcome, Pierre. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Ethan.
There's so many questions I want to ask you, but let's just start with something quick and easy. What are you cooking, and what foods are you excited about and playing with in your own kitchen right now?
Oh boy, I'm gonna sound biased, but I've been cooking a lot of fonio. And I'm right now. I'm in the Bay Area. I'm talking to you from the Bay Area, and I have this wonderful farmers market a few minutes from me, and they have managed to keep open with social distance, of course, and everything that's in season. I'm just loving the vegetables that are there. I discovered some beautiful cilantro flowers, and they go great with my grilled salmon. I'm using my grill a lot too, but all of it, and it's using it with a beautiful. Yesterday, I made a beautiful fonio and grilled peach salad, which was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Excellent. Okay, so dive us into fonio. What is fonio? Where did it come from? How did you get connected to fonio, and sort of what sparked this this journey that you're on now?
Well, that's interesting. It came really organically to me. You know, fonio has been around for 5,000 years. It's an ancient grain from West Africa. And growing up in Dakar, you know, you don't really see much of fonio. And I grew up in Dakar, and I didn't really see much of fonio. I would only encounter it when I would go in the south of Senegal, where my grandparents are from, and that's where fonio is king in that region, you know. But for many traditional countries, crops in our country, some of those crops are not accessible in the city, and that really puzzled me why such an amazing crop like fonio couldn't be accessible in the city like Dakar, which is only a few miles away. And when I was writing my second cookbook, I started to talk about fonio, but I had to make sure my readers had access to fonio. So that's really how I decided to start introducing this crop to this market. I'm like, my thinking was, if I could turn fonio into a world-class crop, I would be able to support farmers, the farmers who are growing it, who are just like these most amazing farmers who have this beautiful product that's very nutritious, gluten-free, and drought resistant. So that's a crop that's like, you know, really hits a few key elements. You know, it's great for the environment, it's great for the people, and it could be great for the farmers if we can turn it into a commercially viable crop. So that was my reasoning behind it, and that's how I partnered with Pierre Thiam, and we launched Yolélé with the vision of working with smallholder farmers, family farmers, and introducing crops that are resilient and nutritious. And there comes fonio.
Amazing. And what does Yolélé mean?
Yolélé is a Fulani word that means let the good time rolls. And I'll explain why. You know, the Fulani people are the largest nomadic people in the world. You know, Fulanis, and which is part of my background. I'm half Fulani myself. And I wanted that nomadic aspect to be part of our vision. You know, I wanted that food from West Africa to transcend borders and to arrive here and reach people like you and conscious consumers around the world.
Amazing. Wow. So, and so I see that Yolélé it's bigger than just fonio. There's many crops. Do the Fulani, is fonio a grain they would cultivate, or what? In a nomadic lifestyle, it's different. You're not in one place planting and taking care of it. You're more traveling with. Tell us more. Help us kind of see that and how that food ecosystem works.
Yeah, so the Fulani traditionally are nomadic people, but many of them have settled now into a sedentary life. You know, with modern time, with colonization, there's been such disruption in our society. So many Fulanis have settled and became farmers, and they are great consumers of fonio. You know, and they love fonio. You know, for different reasons. There's like a big lots of cultural beliefs around fonio. Wherever it's cultivated, you know, it's seen as a spiritual grain. And actually, the Dogon people in Mali, which is a very ancient culture, they call it the seed of the universe in their mythology. So that's one of the reasons why fonio is cultivated. Another reason is also the fact that it's one of the fastest maturing grain. Fonio matures in less than 2 months in some cases.
Wow.
So the farmers, even like the Fulani farmers, they know they can rely on fonio because it's resilient, and they know that regardless of the rain season, the fonio is guaranteed to grow because it's just one of those grains that's drought resistant, that grows in poor soil, that really can grow in sandy soil. That's just how it goes.
That's amazing.
Totally.
I mean, it brings to mind, I'm just thinking a bit of the grain crop in many cultures, whether it's, you know, some of my Irish ancestry, there was the oat, and where I live now here in New York, eventually the corn, the maize crop got here, and she was a sacred, you know, seed, not just a food, but a goddess herself. And I think in China with millet at one point and rice later, it's like these grain crops are so important, especially for what you're talking about, to smallholder farmers to be able to produce their daily sustenance even in difficult conditions.
Absolutely. I think that's why the spiritual connection, and you're right. It's not only fonio. Even in South Senegal, we have a rice culture, and they always have this time of the year after harvest where they take some of the fresh harvested rice to the altars for the gods to thank them for the good harvest. And that's just so there's a spiritual connection. Grains are important. I guess our ancestors wanted to make sure we get that, and this is what we do.
That's right. And they passed down the seed, and now you're doing this amazing thing of inviting other people not just to connect with the food. It's not just some abstract superfood. It's a food that has a history, that has roots, that has a culture, and you're inviting us to sort of step into and connect with all of that, not just the food itself. And I think that's amazing. It also seems, and I think from reading a bit about fonio, it's also, it's not always the easiest crop in all aspects. For example, the growing, very, drought resilient, but that maybe some of the processing of it is difficult. So can you maybe talk a bit about that and sort of what challenges you faced in figuring out how to get this crop from smallholder farmers, and yet in a way that, you could supply it to Whole Foods or, to other places in the world?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And that was a challenge. That's the main challenge with fonio, is the fact that it's a tiny grain. It comes out a tiny grain, but each of these grains are covered with an envelope, with a skin that's inedible. So you have to first remove the skin before it becomes food. And traditionally, this was a manual work. It's really hard labor. I mean, just the whole the agriculture, like I said, is easy. You know, it's drought resistant. You mentioned it. It's nicknamed the lazy farmer's crop for that reason. All you have to do is throw the seeds, and when the first rain comes, and then wait for your harvest. But when it's time to harvest, you have to cut the plants by hand first. This is manual labor. It's very, very hard. And then you have to process it, remove that skin that I mentioned. And traditionally, it was done with a mortar and pestle, you know, that big mortar and pestle that you see in most African households. So that was our processing machine for the fonio. And it takes 1 hour to process only 1 kilo of fonio. Wow. So it's really, really long and tedious. Luckily, there's mechanization now. And with a good machine, you can do 100 kilo per hour, which is really an improvement. But even that, we need to improve that. You know, at our stage with Yolélé, when we started Yolélé, we realized that still much of the work is done manually, and we needed to figure out a way to modernize really the processing and turn the processing from 100 kilo an hour to 3 tons actually per day, which is what we're aiming at, working with investors and entrepreneurs in West Africa itself. Because the whole goal is to really bring investments and economic prosperity in West Africa with this grain, which is revolutionary. Usually what happens is the crop are taken and abroad in the West and transformed there and then returned to us, like the case of cocoa, for instance, and becomes chocolate in somewhere else. So that's just the vision with Fonio. Now we are at this stage where we want to completely modernize the processing, and our first phase was to promote the grain, market the grain, open a market for the grain, which is happening here in the US. We are selling Fonio nationwide now, online. We're about to launch our online store in our website. And, you know, of course, all the natural suspects, Amazon, you know, Whole Foods are carrying our products. We actually even expanded our line of products recently. We have some new pilafs now in the market. And all of these products are flavored with all the products that we want to promote, all the products from West Africa as well. Our pilafs are inspired by traditional recipes using other local products like moringa, and we have the yassa pilaf. We have the jollof pilaf, which is a traditional recipe that you see throughout West Africa.
Amazing. So you're adding products, but it's not like you're adding products and decreasing the biodiversity. You're upping it. It's not just fonio. It's now fonio and moringa, another biodiverse crop. And also it's coming from the same ecosystem. Is that right? These are other crops that farmers can plant sort of as is it rotation or alongside?
Yeah. Absolutely. Like I was trying to mention earlier, the rotation is our traditional way of practicing agriculture. And we want to encourage it because that's the way agriculture itself, the whole agricultural system needs to return to this rotation. You know, that monoculture is what caused a lot of our problems today. You know, monoculture is a big part of climate change that we are talking about. You know, big agri is causing us to limit our diet to 4 crops, you know, pretty much, when there are thousands of other crops that are so much more nutritious and resilient and good for our health too, because even our health is affected by this limited diet, you know. So biodiversity is important in so many aspects. It's great for the environment, it's great for our health, our immune system, and it's great for the soil, it's great for the farmers as well. So this is what we're doing as we launch new products. We also are mindful that to include the biodiversity and to also support farmers to continue rotating the crops. You know, after fonio, we would like farmers to grow bambara beans, for instance, or some type of legumes, so that it enriches the soil. But we need to find markets for these bambara beans now. we need to find markets for the moringa. So that's why we're adding these products in a targeted way like this.
That's amazing. So can what size are the farms, most of the farms that you're sourcing the fonio and other crops from? Are they big farms, small farms?
Oh, no, they're small family farms. They're small farms, really, really tiny for most part. You know, some of them are like groups of farms together, but for the most part, it's small family farms that like where the farmers have their field. They also have a few like cows or muttons that graze around, and they have fruit trees. You know, it's really like a permaculture type of system that you see, like, and you see that throughout the continent, mostly West Africa though. So.
And so was there I mean, that's amazing. That's unbelievable. And that's one of the things we look for in biodiversity from How Good's perspective, looking at farm level biodiversity, not just fonio is a biodiverse ingredient, but also what is the biodiversity in the landscape where it's being grown. And one of the reasons that over and over we see smallholder farmers with higher agrobiodiversity is because of exactly what you're saying. It tends to be more of a permaculture-like approach. There are fruit trees, there are animals integrated. One thing I'm curious about is, was there a market for fonio before you started this, and how were farmers hesitant? Were they excited? Were they sort of growing it for their own consumption and weren't interested in selling it? Has it changed the sort of economics for farmers that you're purchasing it from?
Oh yeah, it has changed. The impact is tremendous. There was not really a market. Most of it was because these farmers are more like subsistence farmers. They consume what they grow, or even when they sell it, it's all, like I said, locally. I mentioned earlier that growing up in Dakar, I didn't know what fonio is. A lot of people in Dakar don't know what fonio is. And they eat baguette breads every day. They eat croissants every day, you know, and yet we don't grow wheat. You know, this is mind-boggling, you know, but this is part of that colonial mentality that we have to, you know, the mindset that we need to change. You know, we think of crops like fonio or sorghum or millet, which are our local traditional crops. We think of them as like substandard crops or country people crops, you know, because we think we want to consume those things that the French are consuming. So we spend so much money bringing wheat flour in the country to bake breads and baguettes, because Dakar people need to have a fresh baguette every day, every single day. And that's the great baguette though. I mean, we serious about it. It's great. But, you know, it would be great to have fonio products like that, fonio bread. You know, we can turn fonio into bread, into pasta, into other products. And there are so many other beautiful products like millet, like sorghum, like bambara beans. I can name thousands of them, you know. And Yolélé vision is to really bring those products to the market, because it's important. If those products don't find a market, many of them tend to disappear. You'd be surprised by the percentage of crops that has disappeared. Just here in America, they say 90% of the biodiversity has disappeared over 100 years. I mean, 90% is a scary number. And where are we going? How are our planet is going to survive through this? And what are we going to leave to our children? Our grandfathers, grandparents left us all these beautiful crops, and we just ignore them, and they're now gone.
Wow. So it's an amazing thing you're doing to carry that story, to keep these seeds alive, really alive and growing. And yet you've also figured out how to do it in a way that is economically viable and even empowering for smallholder farmers in West Africa, across the Sahel. That's amazing. Thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
What other challenges have you faced or sort of overcome on this journey in sort of towards commercializing the crop? That's what I titled this. I don't even know if it's the right way to talk about it, but through sort of growing that expansion, making the fonio more nomadic in a way, and going across borders, as you said. What other challenges have you faced, and how have you sort of approached or addressed them?
Well, at first, like I said, we had to face the issue of the logistic, for instance, the logistic of creating that chain of value that will connect the farmers to the processing, to bringing it in containers to the United States and distributing it. That's a whole logistic. When I was dreaming bringing fonio to the market, I had no idea, no clue. I was like very naive, thinking, oh, I'm gonna come and talk about it, and people will buy it, and realize that it's not as easy. And luckily, I partnered. Thank God we met my partner, Philippe Tevro, who's also a veteran in the food industry. And through our network, and particularly his, we were able to connect with Woodland Foods, who became our partners in distribution. And we took Woodland executives to Senegal, to like this region in Senegal called Kédougou, which is the most remote part of Senegal. And in that area, fonio is king, and the particularity of that region is actually very poor, very, very poor. And it's been hit by migration, because young men have left. They're looking for other opportunities. There's no opportunities. It's poor. And for me, that area is rich in its culture, and it's rich because it has crops like fonio that grows there. But they grow fonio because that's just the grain that they love to eat. Fonio is delicious, by the way. It's very delicate. And in Kédougou, they give it to guests of honor. When you come, they serve you fonio, and they serve it to us, and the executives from Woodland. And we just they fell in love with it, and they realized how impactful they could be, by working with us and bringing this crop to the world, because not only we can just change the whole migration issue. For instance, people would stay home because they would have opportunity to work with fonio and just bring income, a decent income from their work. So that's really how it started. And did I answer your question, actually?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it sounds like in the same way you're doing ecosystem partnerships for the farmers and figuring out what crops to rotate and help build the ecosystem, you also had to do that in order to make the enterprise work, to find the right partners in the ecosystem to work on the logistics aspects, which can be significant. So yeah, I think you got that great. What is it sounds, the economics for the farmers on that end sound great. How is it on this end? How's the business doing? We've heard from several of our talks around biodiversity that it's almost a little early. Like many people in the public are not interested in biodiversity per se. They don't know it as sort of a term or something they should look for. And so how is the business doing? Are consumers excited? Is it growing? Is there interest? Is there expansion? Tell us a bit about that from the sort of product selling business side.
Oh, yeah, I'm very excited to be here today. And we started with one Whole Foods in Harlem a few years ago in 2017, when that Whole Foods were opening. It was a natural location because Harlem has an African community. And that fonio did great in that Whole Foods. We just became a champion at Whole Foods, and Whole Foods just urged us to grow into different Whole Foods in New York City first, and then in the northeastern region. And today we are distributed nationally, and we are still champion in our category. We're receiving even correspondence from Whole Foods national sellers, and to just let us know how great fonio is doing. I think that's a set of different a combination of things. One of them being the fact that there's a growing number of conscious consumers who are looking for the fact that fonio is a gluten-free and nutritious grain that's really rich in amino acids, particularly cysteine and protein that are deficient in most grains. Fonio is rich in those. And also the other fact that really we saw a boost was during this pandemic. The pandemic also was good to us, if there's such thing that, we could say anything like that. But it was good to the sales of fonio, in online and in the retail. You know, people went to supermarkets and started buying fonio in quantities, and we had new customers, and they returned after tasting fonio. You always return because it's really an easy grain to cook. It's 5 minutes cooking, you know, and it's very light, you know, so you don't feel heavy. You know, it's just really, and the economics been great here, and it's growing. Of course, the pandemic also hit us hard in the food service level, because restaurants are not doing so well. So we notice less sales in that the food service, but on the retail aspect, it's been doing great, and there's no reason to believe that it's going to slow down. You know, we launched new fonio products, you know, during the pandemic, which is a bold move, but I thought, you know, it was really a smart move, and it's catching up. You know, even the new fonio products, we launched 5 pilafs, and they are doing so far so good.
And you said there's other new products coming up too beyond the pilafs.
Yes, we're about to launch the chips too. We're about to launch our fonio chips, and fonio chips with dawa dawa flavor. Dawa dawa, I don't know if you know it, but that's another crop that we need to support. It's a fermented locust bean from a tree that's also similar to the moringa tree actually, and the seed from that tree are fermented, and it's a technique that's been happening for hundreds of years in West Africa, and that's what we use to season like our sauces. That really amazing umami flavor that you taste in African cuisine, that comes from the dawa dawa. So we're about to launch some dawa dawa chips in the market. We call it the Afro Funk.
Amazing.
So look out for that. And a few other chips are coming up, the sea salt, the plain one, and the yassa one as well.
Has the growth of the company, has that then put challenges on the supply side in terms of, you know, sometimes scaling up and growing to more and more smallholder farmers can be a bit of a challenge? Have you been able to get ahead of that? Is there some, even in the pandemic with this spike, some supply chains had just a challenge keeping up. How is that working? How are you sort of managing that on the supply side of it? And do you do that directly, or is there a cooperative, or sort of who manages that on the ground in West Africa?
That's an excellent question. Actually, we were always mindful of the growth. We wanted the growth to be connected to the supply as well, you know, and we just had learned the sad quinoa story, and we just wanted to make sure this is not what's happening with fonio. We wanted to make sure fonio is always connected to the farmers, and the farmers benefit from it. They have to be the ultimate beneficiary. Otherwise, we miss the story, we miss the mission. So it's been like that with we kept that as a target from the beginning. And Teranga, Yolélé has been investing in research and training farmers, and that's been happening from the beginning. We're working with researchers in Senegal and in Mali as well, connected with Yale University and Cornell, and we are improving the seeds, and we are also working to have better agricultural practices for the farmers to improve their production. So traditionally, like I said, the farming of fonio was done by just really dispatching the seeds after the first rain. But now we started research proving that growing fonio in row would improve the production. So we are focusing on improving the production from the farmer's side, as well as extending our network of farmers. You know, this is another thing that we are doing. In the beginning, our fonio was coming from Senegal and Mali. Now we're getting fonio coming from Togo as well. That is traceable fonio, organic fonio. We're getting fonio from Ghana, and it's going to grow organically. As the demand grows, we'll grow the production of fonio at the supply side. So that's been like that. And we work with different partners, to answer your question. We work with NGOs, we work with cooperatives, and we just consolidate all of it and connect them with Woodland that imports the fonio directly.
Amazing. Yeah, it sounds like you're having learned from some other, like you said, the quinoa story, and are figuring out how to balance that growth, but then also, simple productivity enhancements that can actually mean a lot, the different ways of growing things for farmers on the ground. So that's, yeah, amazing. Excellent. Okay. And just looking at the time, in a little bit, we'll head towards some breakouts where people can talk, chat with each other, and develop some questions for you. I wanted to, just because of the time we're at in the world right now, ask if there's anything you wanted to say or offer around current events and the protests and the movement and awareness that's growing, but then also if it's in any way connected to biodiversity and how to sort of, I don't know, draw some connections there. But your thoughts would be appreciated.
Well, yeah, thanks for giving me this platform. Actually, it's been interesting to see how the connection with these current events has affected our businesses, both, you know, my restaurant Teranga and Yolélé. You know, we've been definitely feeling the love from consumers who are seeing us as a Black business, and they are consciously supporting this just because they're realizing how deep this country is torn and how deep this country is hurt, and everyone can make a difference. But it goes really deeper than that. You know, it makes a case for diversity. We're talking about biodiversity, but diversity at large. You know, we need to have a diverse diet, but we also need to realize that this is a society that's also diverse, and we need to embrace it. You know, and you look at agriculture in this country, the history of agriculture in this country is really seated in something completely rotten. You know, agriculture started with slavery, and Black people, African captives, were the ones who were on the should I say on the wrong side of it, who were exploited. And another thing that came with this slavery system was this monoculture agriculture that we're living today, which is one of the biggest cause of climate change. You know, so it's all connected. I mean, this monoculture, big agri, is causing 1/4 of the greenhouse gas emission of the planet. And the amount of water that's being used for agriculture by big agri, by monoculture, is crazy. Some 70% of the potable water is used by big agri, and not even talking about the water that's polluted because of the use of pesticides and all kind of chemical entrants. You know, so we need to really rethink at the source our agricultural system, and thinking about changing the system is to start by looking at the history and the source of it. And the history of it started with the exploitation of Black people. And this is what we see. This is just a consequence of it. This is what's happening all the way to a couple of weeks ago with the unfortunate Floyd event, you know, and that's just something, you know, people are, you know, awakened to, and it's about time, you know, and that's great to see that, you know, there are great Americans who are like just from all backgrounds who are just united in this and calling for more diversity and just putting corporate America, challenging corporate America to be a part of the solution, and they can be a part of the solution. And I'm optimistic when I see how things are, how people are reacting, and how for instance, in our small level at Yolélé and Teranga, how the kind of support we are getting. And when you look at the marches that are going on in this country right now, and the concrete changes that are happening, that have happened in a couple of weeks, you know, I think we can take control of this situation and really rewrite our history.
Thank you.
At least correct it.
Thank you for sharing that, your thoughts on that. And I love you bringing it back to the history, to the origins, and also to the thought of biodiversity and diversity and their unity, and how there is, and you're actually an incredible example of sort of showing how you can be supporting both and growing both in an economically viable way, supporting biodiversity and diversity. So thank you for tying those together, and for us to see that. And it's good for business. And it's good for business. It's amazing. Over to you all and your questions. If you want to put questions in the chat, that would be lovely. You can also raise your hand. Are there any questions for Pierre? Dominique, okay, let's see if we can get, I'm gonna unmute. Dominique, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for this platform. It's been an honor to hear you speak, Chef Pierre, and Ethan for asking those great questions. I'm just curious to know, you've been having great success in the United States over the past 3 to 4 years. And I'm just wondering, what other markets are you interested in going to with Fonio? And then do you feel that, I guess, the educational gap that was once here in the United States will present to be similarly elsewhere, whether it's the Caribbean or other parts of Africa or even Europe or Latin America?
Yes, very good question, Dominic. It's good to point out that there are other markets that we are targeting. The Americas, absolutely. I think the Caribbean will be more ready for an African crops than it is in the United States. So the US was like a school for us, this method that we are now going to deploy around the world. We're having demands from all the way from Australia, but one of our main focus is Africa also. We really, really want to correct that mindset and have African cities starting using Fonio. And we are working on distributing Fonio, starting with Senegal, but also growing to West Africa and also Northern Africa as well. Because Fonio looks like couscous, and it could be presented as a gluten-free couscous. So that's also a big market for that in the North Africa and in Emirates countries. Europe obviously is another market we are targeting, and there will be education as well. Education is just definitely a big part of the way of marketing it.
Great.
Where are you from?
I'm from Liberia originally, grew up here in the States, and have been around on the East Coast and some time in Las Vegas, but definitely interested in seeing what other Africans are doing with, agriculture from small subsistence farmers and making it more mainstream for everyone else. And, the education part. And then also, I like what you're doing with the introduction of products and then being able to introduce more traditional foods that aren't really thought of by us or by others. So, I mean, it's super, super cool to see that you're doing this, and I'm really inspired for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. I think there was another person who had raised their hand. It just says iPhone, so I don't know who it is.
Yeah, it's more of a how we can help. I agree I'm in complete agreement with what she was just saying. I'm very inspired and very interested in ways we can further what Pierre's doing, because I really think that this is the way we should be going. And I'm just wondering specifically what ways can people help? Short of joining the organization, of course, but what are other ways that we could help raise awareness, do more here in the United States?
Oh, there's so many ways to help, and I like to say that everyone is responsible to make that change that we need to make for the system to be just more equitable. For our aspect, for Fonio, for instance, we're asking people to go to the markets and to buy Fonio or to order Fonio online and be creative. The fun thing about Fonio is it's very versatile. So when you cook with Fonio, just take a picture and post it on our social media, and that's one way to help, and tag us, of course. That's really just one way to help, by consuming Fonio and by sharing it with your friends and neighbors and families. The one thing to note is the fact that Fonio scores low on the glycemic index. And many of us know people who are suffering from diabetes, so they need to know that Fonio is one of those crops that they should consider in their new diet, because that's, again, scores low on the glycemic index, in addition to being gluten-free. So celiac disease, all those people are benefiting from Fonio. So being part of the, spreading the message, the word on Fonio is definitely helpful. And talk about Yolélé Foods, our company, and tag us, and will be very helpful, and really appreciate the fact that you are willing to help and you ask for how to help.
Thank you. There's also a question here from Yorm that I can read, but let me see. I just asked Yorm if they might want to come off mute and ask your question there.
I'm working on a restaurant in Accra with Accra, Ghana, where we're focusing on going back to our roots. So just similar to some of the points Pierre had mentioned around focusing on millet and sorghum and fonio. And so I'm excited, one, for Dawa Dawa chips because it's tied into the story we're trying to tell in Accra. But I also wanted to get a sense of, in terms of the customer set in the US, are you finding differences in responses to the products? Like, do you see Africans in the diaspora responding to the product more from a familiarity, they want to get a sense of home, or are they tied in more to the sustainability, biodiverse story? Like, what are the reasons that people gravitate towards a brand from your perspective?
Well, for all those reasons, again, if you remember, I mentioned how we started selling our fonio in Harlem, which was an area with African immigrants who were looking for a connection with home. And that's how our products started to get sold in the United States with this segment of the population. But then, you know, the vast majority of our consumers are really people who are looking to have a diverse diet and who are looking to have nutritious food so that they come from all segments. You know, they're conscious consumers. They can be Africans, but they also are just regular Americans from all walks of life who are just conscious of the way they're eating, and this is just a segment that needs to be thought about when we're doing business with food, because people are just more educated now and they really are looking for products that can make a difference. They want to have an impact. They're looking to spend their money the right way, you know, and on themselves, on the product, on the environment, and all those things. Fonio is and not only fonio, many other African crops are responding to those questions. Good answers to those questions.
Thank you. Oh, this is great. We have a lot of questions in here. I hope we have time to get to all of them, but we might not. So I'm going to go to Ariana to see if you want to ask yours.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chef, as well. This was fantastic. I lived in Senegal for a few years, so great to hear about your work with farmers in Senegal. I work with a team in East Africa, Malawi, Rwanda, and Tanzania, basically connecting farming communities to markets in the region. And recently we've been experiencing, because of coronavirus issues at the borders, I know this is a problem that many people experience in many countries around the world. And we've kind of talked a lot about building resilient supply chains. So those connections between farmers and markets, not only from a climate perspective, but also making sure that if products are relying on a specific market, and there's maybe a climatic event or a political event or anything else that happens, that they can continue to rely and depend on that market for revenue. And I was wondering if this is part of your thinking as your share of the market and your business expands. Have you considered, or how are you thinking about resilience in the work that you're doing in Senegal? Jerry Jeff.
Very good question. And you know, resiliency is it's at the beginning and at the end for us. You know, it starts with resiliency, and when we select the crops that we are going to include in our business model, they have to be resilient. They have to be good for the planet. And most of those crops, you know, that we are working with are drought resistant. All of them are drought resistant. You know, and that's key. You know, for many reasons. We also want to make sure we develop those open markets and we develop the production of those crops, because it's also key to food security in those regions, you know, especially when we have issues like pandemic now and we see borders being closed and we see all kind of situation that could happen. And yes, resiliency is absolutely key to our business model, absolutely. That's a short answer to
Okay, all right. Let's go to Brianne for a moment here and get this question.
Hi there. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Pierre, congrats on what you're doing. It's really awesome and inspiring to hear from you today about what you're doing. I just was wondering if you had any tips. I'm in agriculture as well, on the cannabis and hemp side. And one of the things that really resonated with me from the conversation earlier was you were talking about market takers and market creation, and if you've had any successful techniques in creating those value chain partnerships to create more pull-through demand for your product versus pushing. As an agricultural inputs provider, we've been trying to help farmers that have this high value input of a hemp seed, which the price of that is so high. And if they don't have a taker for that biomass at the end of the season, it can be really catastrophic to that farmer. And so obviously we're talking about different crops, but curious if you've had any experience getting inroads with really valuable partners that process that I could leverage in my own day job.
Yeah, that's a very good question. You're already thinking in the right direction by thinking collaboration with different companies, because I think that's what made it for us. We were able to realize our strengths and our weaknesses, and one of them was distribution. That's why we partnered with Woodland. Another one was at the supply side, and we needed to strengthen the farmers, and that's why we courted entrepreneurs locally to invest in the transformation of Fonyo. So creating a network of collaboration of companies, of different companies who have interest in different segments of the products, it would be a way to go. And I would say for hemp, there would definitely be these different companies, because there's so much byproducts that could come out of hemp. For the small story, actually, I'm working on a couple of recipes for a cookbook with hemp oil that's coming out, and I was approached with the producers of this hemp product called Podwill. I don't know if maybe I should figure out a way to introduce it to them. If you can send an email, I will make the connection happily. But I would encourage you to think in that way.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Greatly appreciate it. Thanks to Pierre and the rest of the team at Yolélé. And we will look forward to seeing you in upcoming innovation sessions. Thanks, everyone.